There's a long-standing ideal of the journalist as an objective observer, standing apart from the stories they cover and keeping any personal feelings out of the mix. But over the past year, the Black Lives Matter movement has sparked a debate about whether that approach is realistic or even desirable. Now that reckoning is continuing at the Washington Post, with a different topic taking center stage. Adam Riley has more.
Back in 2018, reporter Felicia Sonmez made headlines after accusing journalist Jonathan Kamen of sexual assault. Last year, she was suspended by the Washington Post after sending this tweet in the wake of Kobe Bryant's death, noting the beloved NBA star was once accused of rape. Now, Sonmez is back in the news after revealing that starting in 2018, the Post barred her from covering stories involving Me Too and claims of sexual misconduct. After that revelation sparked an outcry, Sonmez said the ban has been lifted, tweeting, "This is good news, but it's unfortunate that it had to come at such a high emotional toll and after my distress was dismissed for years." Apparently, the debate over journalistic subjectivity still hasn't been resolved.
You know, Callie, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I think there was probably some other things at work here that we didn't know anything about. But this whole idea that you can't cover something that has happened to you. If you had a murder in the family, you can't cover a murder. You know, you could use so many. What about cancer, health issues? It's just the notion is just crazy.
Well, the problem is that the fact that white men cover white men has never been challenged. But so when the issue of bias about bringing a lived experience to your reporting comes up, it is always directed at people from marginalized communities. That's just it. So this does not mean that everybody who comes from has a lived experience and then may report on a subject matter that involves that does not have to have an editor. We are journalists. We have an editor. But to say that she doesn't bring something else to the discussion because of her lived experience, it seems to me that that's just, off. And particularly when you look around the newsroom and see that rule not being applied to everybody else. If we applied the rule they applied to her to the White House correspondents, that room would be empty.
That's true.
I mean, I agree. This was a ridiculous rule, and it never made any sense. I think there's as much an issue here about social media policy, right? I mean, I think the Washington Post is just very conservative about this kind of thing, and she spoke out in both instances here on social media, and I think they tend to sort of have a knee-jerk negative reaction to that. Right. But I think it's also just a fallacy that if you're someone who's experienced sexual assault, you're not able to cover it. In fact, covering sexual assault is very difficult. Often victims feel re-traumatized by the way in which they're reported on. So having someone who has sensitivity to that is actually a benefit, in my opinion. So it was an odd decision from the start.
I think there was probably more to it, but we don't know.
I have to agree with Susie. I think there are two issues at play here. There's the social media issue, and then there's the whether someone with a lived experience can still be objective. I think it's worth noting that the thing that got the reporter in trouble wasn't her reporting. It was her reacting to a story in which she was not reporting anything. It was her reaction on social media. But I think that one of the great things about diversification in a newsroom is that you're bringing new lived experiences, different ideas and different perspectives into a place that frankly hasn't had a lot of them for decades and decades and decades. And so I think it's only normal that there's some questioning about what people can cover and what people can't. But I think the bottom line is the assumption is that the bar for objectivity is set at the white male experience. And that's not really the case anymore and really never has been. But now there are people with different perspectives and different experiences who are able to inform the reporting. And I think there's still a bit of a block there. It's hard to believe that you can live through something as traumatic as what this reporter lived through and still cover it. But you can and you should.
Well, fundamentally, this is about a misunderstanding of what objectivity is. It does not mean that you are neutral in thought, word, and deed. It means that you are able to go out and report a story and pursue the truth in a fair and open-minded way. And what was surprising about this from the beginning is that Marty Baron, the just retired editor of the Washington Post, knows exactly what objectivity is and has spoken about it quite eloquently. And yet it was, and yet Felicia Sonmez was singled out as somebody who could not report objectively. And I think that that was a mistake for all of the reasons that that all the rest of you have said. I'm glad that this has finally been reversed, and I think that let's hope we don't see something like this happen again.
Well, Susie, one of the problems with this case was that the person that she accused of sexual assault was another reporter, or I should say a bureau chief at the Washington Post. And the circumstances were, you know, they were both drunk or had a lot to drink. And so if you read the details, it's a horrible story. It's grotesque, but, you know, and then somebody else accused him of the same behavior. So I wonder if that didn't play into it, that, you know, it was someone else at the Washington Post.
Yeah, although I still think that it's not an editor's job to sort of pass judgment on what someone's experience of sexual assault is, right? And whether or not they believe her or not believe her is sort of beside the point, right? But the fact is she's still able to do her job. And if they don't think she's able to do her job, then that's a different conversation. But just banning her outright from covering anything that has anything to do with sexual assault seems just like overkill.
Mm-hmm. I think they were annoyed about the Kobe Bryant tweet, too.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah. I thought the timing of the tweet really set it off.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. I agree with that.